I'm Kelsey Litchfield, and this is the Field Advisor Podcast, where I talk with local experts to unpack the latest agronomy information and research, giving you the knowledge to make informed decisions out in the field. Welcome back to the Field Advisor Podcast. I'm Kelsey Litchfield, joined by Torey Colburn, who is the Midwest Conservation Agronomist with the American Farmland Trust, who's up in Northern Illinois. Torey, tell us where you're located at.
So home for me is Mendota, Illinois. I'm the very northwest corner of LaSalle County. So I'm within, spitting distance, I'd say, of Bureau County, Lee County, and DeKalb County.
Okay, so sticking with that area, give us just a quick summary of what conditions are in your neck of the woods.
Well, we're more or less normal on our moisture. We were behind for a while, but we have caught back up. I was just in the field this morning. Moisture conditions are good out there. The crop looks good. Beans around here actually look very good. Minimal disease pressure from what I can see. Corn is looking good. Most of that is into the mid to late dough stage. We're starting to see some of that begin to dent. Lots of pods on the beans, relatively minimal amount of insect defoliation. So I've been told by some of the farmers I've talked to around the state that I happen to sit in kind of the garden spot for the year. So we'll see what happens the rest of the season.
And the August weather forecast is starting to trend drier for you?
It is, although I just got a notification on my phone that we have a severe thunderstorm watch. So I think they are calling for some at least spotty thunderstorms yet this afternoon. So we'll see. Yep. But I think the long-term forecast that I saw for August is that it is going to turn a little bit drier. So we'll hope we've got the moisture that we need to finish the crop already.
You mentioned in your crop report here, which you submitted August 6th, so it's been about a week, more than a week of this, but you made a note, fields seem to have been done well setting pods, though you are not seeing many 4-bean pods at this point. Is that still holding up?
Yep. In the fields that I walked this morning, I'm seeing mostly the 3-bean pods. In previous years, I do recall seeing more 4-bean pods. That's not to say that there aren't some out there, but just in my walks the last month or so, I have not seen very many 4-bean pods compared to what I've seen in years past. But as we all know with soybeans, sometimes the yield will still surprise you.
Mm-hmm. What about corn? Are you seeing any tip back issues? I know the pollination issue earlier here in July. What are you seeing out of the corn?
I haven't seen a lot of tip back issues just yet. I have run into a few situations where the wrapped tassel did affect some of the pollination, more missed kernels on the ear than what you would typically expect to see. Ears that I tore open this morning in fields that are in a pretty good soft to hard dough, they're pollinated more or less to within an inch or so of the ear tip, and they were filling kernels pretty well. So at least around here, I haven't seen a lot of tip back issues just yet. I know there are some other areas that you do see that a little bit on some of our hillsides, I suppose, but some of the other areas in the state that have been a little bit drier, I know they're dealing with a little bit more tip back in some of those spots.
And the corn ears, pretty good size?
I counted an 18 by 40 this morning, so it was pretty good. The depth is not quite there just yet, but that may improve.
We'll continue to follow that because, especially in soybeans, August, they say what's the old adage saying? You gotta August makes beans or something along the lines of that. So we'll continue to watch that. And drought, you said, really good moisture. So setting up to hopefully to end August pretty well.
I would hope so around here. Yeah, I think I don't know if we're not gonna break any records, I would say, around here, but I think we're gonna be at least on par with average to above average yields in most situations.
I want to talk diseases real quick, Torey. I know you had said in your crop report, and then you just shared that you're seeing minimal disease in soybeans, but you said you have seen SDS and downy mildew. You had not seen any white mold. So that's still holding true. Are you seeing any more reports of it?
I did see a little bit of white mold, not enough to really be consequential, but just enough to say, yep, that's definitely white mold. The sudden death syndrome that I've seen has increased a little bit. I see that primarily in end rows or along wheel tracks where there's a little extra compaction. Um, we do see it there. Um, it's not nearly as bad as what I have seen in years past. Hopefully that will hold true. The nice thing about, if there is a nice thing to say about sudden death, is that the the later it goes before you see it, the less impact it's going to have on your yield. Because if it waits until this R5, R6 timeframe to show up and actually cause plant death, we've still been able to more or less fill those pods on that plant, so that plant can still contribute to overall yield. If we start seeing that early at that R3, R4, and we have plant death before R5, then that plant is done. There's no yield in that plant at all. So in this area where I'm seeing it, it was at least R5 before I saw it. So I don't expect that to be a tremendous yield robber, and it's not in large areas of the field from what I can tell.
In corn, you reported northern corn leaf blight, gray leaf spot, ear smut, tar
Mhm.
spot, and you said you're definitely seeing more tar spot developing on the lower leaves of the corn now. Expand on that a bit.
So I was that August 6th report would have been post fungicide applications in most of the corn that I was in. I think the fungicide applications did a pretty good job of holding back some of that tar spot that was out there pre-pollination. It is starting to show up a little bit more. In fact, in fields that I was in this morning, I was starting to see more and more of that tar spot about knee high, up to about my hip. Most of it is still below the ear. We do find some that's a little bit at or above the ear leaf. And what I'm seeing now is what I always was told is the disease matrix that comes in kind of late season. So we're starting to see some southern rust. We're starting to see some coalesced lesions from the northern corn leaf blight and the gray leaf spot in conjunction with that tar spot. Starting to kind of see all of it together in one section of the leaf, or entire leaves that are beginning to be cannibalized anyway by that corn plant to help fill the ear. So we are starting to see more disease pressure in that lower canopy. Ideally, with those fungicide applications, we're hoping to protect the ear leaf and above, or a couple leaves below the ear, and all the way up to the top of the plant. So as long as we don't start seeing a lot of that disease pressure hitting those leaves, we'll probably be okay. But it is important to note that it is out there, and it's relevant for field history.
Are you getting a lot of calls of farmers saying, I don't know what this is. Come look at it, please?
I've had a few of those. Yeah, I've had a few pictures sent my way, and typically it's one of those. It's usually the tar spot, the gray leaf, or the northern corn leaf blight. I have started seeing, as I said earlier this morning, I saw some southern rust. So we're starting to have farmers finding the southern rust and wondering why what they've always maybe known as common rust. Why does this look different? Because it does look different than the common rust that many farmers would be used to. So, but we've had southern rust for a while. It, as I'm told, doesn't overwinter here, so it has blown up on some of the weather fronts that have moved into the area. So we are seeing it.
Speaking of weather, any wind? I know some places you talk about severe thunderstorm watch you're under. Seems like
Mhm.
wind is becoming a topic again.
Yeah, wind is always sort of the wild card at this time of the year. You either get it or you don't. I know over the weekend they had some pretty significant wind up around Belvidere, Illinois. They actually had some damage in town there, structural damage to some buildings. So I imagine some of the corn in that area got some damage. And I saw some pictures this morning from down around Homer, Illinois, in southern Champaign County, where there's some corn that's pretty flat. Um, we like to be optimistic and say that some of that will begin to stand up and bring that ear back to a harvestable height. But there's no doubt going to be some yield implications from that. And wind is one of those things that it's very, you clearly can't predict it. It's just one of those things that you have to kind of deal with. You're either in the right spot or you're not.
Definitely. Anything else, Tori, for corn and soybeans before we move on to cover crops?
I would just say, I know it's getting to be late August. It's important to keep sharp eyes in the field yet through the end of the month and into September, because there's still some things that can happen out there that can rob some yield. So it's important to be on top of it.
Mm-hmm. So cover crops, Tori, real quick, give us the audience some background of maybe what you do in your job as Midwest Conservation Agronomist. You probably talk cover crops quite a bit, right?
I do. Yep. I talk cover crops frequently. So yeah, as conservation agronomist with American Farmland Trust, my primary role is to provide the agronomic support and technical assistance to producers who are looking to bring or have already brought cover crops into their corn and soybean rotation. Now, realistically, what that means on the ground is that most of the farmers that I deal with are using cereal rye in front of their soybean crop. Um, a lesser number are using cover crops ahead of their corn. Those who are having mixed results with it. Some are very successful, some not so much. So I do work a lot with farmers using cereal rye in front of the soybeans.
What are you seeing with corn? What's working and what's not in terms of planting cover crops before corn? Because I hear those mixed reviews too. What are you
Hmm.
finding?
Yeah, well, the tough thing with corn is that I like to tell farmers corn's kind of a wimp when it first comes up. It really doesn't like to see competition for sunlight, for space, for nutrients, anything. So that's sort of the challenge when using cover crops in front of corn, is that you have to find the right either species mix or termination time frame for that to really be successful. Most of the farmers that, at least in my area, they found reasonable success using a winter terminal mix. So they're using the oats and the radishes that they can get on, this time of year, and let that sort of terminate over the winter, so that they really don't have anything to deal with, and they don't have to worry about some of that nutrient tie up or other plant competition in the spring. So
Mm-hmm.
we have not had a lot of success in this area with some of the overwintering legumes that would help to, provide some nitrogen to that corn crop. As the old saying goes, everybody says we're just too far north, and that has a grain of truth no matter where you are.
I'm gonna back up for a quick second. Any double crop in your area that you
Th-
know of? That how's that doing?
There is some. We don't have that much. We don't have quite as much wheat as what there used to be years and years ago. We do have a little bit more in my local area because ADM does now have this mill right here in Mendota. So we do see a little bit more wheat grown locally. Most of that does not get double cropped unless harvest is pretty early. We just don't have the time frame to be able to get a decent double crop soybean before frost would come in and kill it.
Sure. I was curious when you were mentioning all of that about double crop.
Hmm.
Okay, going back to cover crops, talk about seeding because with harvest comes also cover crop seeding for many. Talk about aerial seeding. You said it can be an advantage for early establishment, but it
Hmm.
also requires adequate soil moisture. So talk about that whole relationship and what farmers should be aware of when it comes to aerial seeding.
Yeah, aerial seeding, you get a real mixed bag when you talk to farmers who have used it. Some will swear by it because it allows them to get their cover crops established so much earlier and get good fall establishment before it would go dormant. Others will tell you that they've spent all the money they're going to spend on aerial seeding because they just have not been able to get it established, because they get it spread and then it doesn't rain, and that's a very real possibility. The the linchpin in the whole thing is moisture. Seeds require adequate soil moisture for them to germinate and establish. So in a perfect world, we would seed our cover crop aerially this afternoon, and then it rains on it tonight, and we've got adequate soil moisture to keep it going once it germinates. The challenge with aerial seeding is that we do need to bump up those seeding rates, which does add some cost, obviously, to making that seeding application. But the reason we do that is because seed to soil contact is critical with getting anything to germinate. And with an aerial seeding application, there is a percentage of that seed that may never actually get to the soil. It can get caught up in leaf axils and in the ear and that sort of thing. And some of it doesn't actually make it to the soil surface. And that which does is simply resting on the soil surface. It's not really incorporated into that top half inch or so. So getting a rain shortly after application can help solidify that seed to soil contact for that seed and help get it going much sooner. And the sooner we get it germinated, the better, because there are seed predators out there that will just walk up to the buffet if there's seed sitting in dry soil.
When you talk about aerial application, are you seeing many use drones, or is it primarily a plane, or what's the common method?
I would say that in terms of the raw number of acres, airplanes are still doing most of it. We are seeing more and more farmers either employ a drone themselves, and they kind of make a side business out of it, or we see some actual contractors who are making a full-fledged business out of cover crop seeding and fungicide applications and that sort of thing. So the advantage that the drones have is that they can reach some of those parts of the fields that the airplane flying at 120 to 130 miles an hour just is not going to get. And you have a whole lot less over applying with the drone. You don't accidentally get some over on the neighbor's field with the drone typically. So we're starting to see drones be more and more common. Clearly, they're not as fast as the airplane, but they do offer some advantages there in terms of just being able to reach or just being able to apply cover crops in fields that an airplane won't even look at. So it's an up and coming thing.
Talk about the timing of aerial applications. Here in your crop report, you talked about what to remember when flying it into soybean fields versus into standing corn. So talk about the differences of timing. When's the best time to put that seed on?
Yeah, I actually saw this morning one of my local aerial applicators was flying. I believe they're flying some oats and radishes, maybe some cereal rye into seed corn. There's a lot of seed corn in my area, and most of that is closed out for the season. So we're starting to see them fly cover crop into some of those fields, which actually works out quite well because there's a lot of sunlight that hits the ground in those fields. That's obviously that's a different system than commercial corn or soybeans, but in corn, if we're talking about spreading some cereal rye aerially, I kind of like to see that plant hit its sort of natural senescence, where the leaves begin to droop, that ear might be hanging. Generally, it might still have a little bit of green color, but it might be sort of more or less looking, dead from the road, I suppose. That allows more of that seed to get to the soil surface because we don't have so much hanging up on the leaves. That's at the farmer's discretion when that's ready to be done. But realistically, you could go out right now and seed some cereal rye in that corn. It would probably still be there come harvest. It will germinate and it will be alive. In soybeans, I usually would recommend, now this would be obviously soybeans, we're going to be going to corn the next year, so our species selection is going to be a little bit different. But generally, I like to see that go around here, like the end of August, early September. Labor Day is a good sort of calendar mark to use. We would like to see, in a perfect world, aerial applications going into standing soybeans occur as those beans are just beginning to yellow, as they're just beginning to turn from that natural green color. The reason for that is we want that seed to be able to make it all the way to the soil surface. We don't want it landing on top of a bunch of leaves and stems that have fallen already. We need that seed to soil contact. So if we can get the seed out there and then have all those leaves fall on top of that seed, it helps to conserve moisture and helps to get that seed off to a better start. The flip side of that is if we go too early, we either don't get adequate germination or we do get good germination, but then we have too much growth of that cover crop before harvest, and then we can run into some issues with cutting off part of that cover crop and taking it into the combine during soybean harvest. So it's more of an art than a science.
See a majority still drilling their cover crop seed in?
There's a lot of drilling still going on. Drilling is a great way. It's probably the preferred method in terms of being sure you get a good fall stand established. A lot of folks that might be grazing their cover crops are using a seed drill because they need to have they're depending on that fall forage for livestock. Um, but we are seeing a lot more of some of the other methods being used. There's a lot of air seeders being used on a vertical tillage tool, or just a straight broadcast with dry fertilizer and then being incorporated with a very light tillage pass following that. So all are good methods in my book.
Mm-hmm. Talk about double checking your herbicide program and how that's important when seeding these cover crops.
Yeah. See, so a lot of the I guess frustrations or troubles that you might hear reported with, I couldn't get my cover crop established in the fall. A lot of times it's because there was an overlooked issue with some herbicide carryover. So it is important to know, what products you're using in season in your corn and soybeans and how those might interact with the species that you're selecting to use that fall. Because if we don't allow enough time, or if we haven't had adequate rainfall to help sort of dilute some of that out of the soil system, we can run into some real issues with being able to get cover crops established in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, cereal rye is kind of immune to most of those, but not all. So that's another reason why a lot of the cover crop usage that we see is the cereal rye in front of a soybean crop.
Big picture, are you noticing more farmers adopting cover crops? It seems like it kind of ebbs and flows
Mm-hmm.
with interest in planting cover crops. Again, talking big picture, what's your overall observations?
So I think some of some of these statistics would say that cover crop adoption is actually kind of in a downward trend at the moment. However, I've over the last couple of years, I've been having a lot more conversations with farmers who have expressed interest in at least trying it, right? So we have a lot of farmers that say, well, I'm going to try it on 50 acres or 100 acres. I've never done it before, or I tried it once years ago. But I keep hearing about all these soil health benefits and the weed suppression that I can get from the use of cover crops. So I think there's some real value in that for me, and I want to see how I can make this work. So I think broad spectrum in terms of total number of acres, we may actually be tapering down, but in terms of the number of farmers who are expressing some interest in doing it, I would probably argue that we're starting to see more and more who are sort of showing that interest in trying to do something different on their farm.
Speaking of weed suppression, let's pause right there because Illinois Soybean Association with our on-farm trial network, one of their trials that they'll be doing is cover crops and spring weed suppression. Talk about that a little bit, what you've been seeing from farmers planting cover crops in terms of weed suppression. Has it been successful? Has it just, does it depend? Does it depend on the year? What's kind of your synopsis there?
I think it's kind of a mix of all of that. Sort of my first real observation. This was years ago before I came to AFT. My first real observation with the weed suppression of cereal rye on water hemp, I did not expect to see what I was seeing, and it's a real benefit, especially when you manage that cover crop effectively. They really can suppress weeds, and I think that's going to be a vital tool moving forward, especially controlling water hemp in our soybeans, because everybody that I talk to across the state, everyone battles it. And if we can have another mode of action out there, right, with having that cover crop suppressing some water hemp seed, uh, there's real benefit there.
Talk about why it works. Like, how would you convince a farmer to try it on their field?
Yeah. So what I always tell farmers is that, particularly with water hemp, right? It's a small seeded broadleaf weed. It germinates in the top quarter to half inch of soil. Water hemp is a voracious seed producer. It will produce a lot of seeds per plant, and it exists and survives in a lot of very unusual or largely inhospitable environments as compared to our crops, right? So it can survive in some of those situations and under circumstances that we typically wouldn't expect, right? Drought conditions, flood conditions, it tends to survive all of it, right? But basically, because it's germinating in that top quarter to half inch of soil, it's taking sort of a environmental cues as far as when to germinate, right? And in the springtime, when we have warm daytime temperatures, the sun is out, our soils are warming, that top quarter to half inch of soil has some pretty big temperature spikes, right? It goes up during the day and then the sun goes down at night and the temperature in that top quarter to half inch starts to drop quite a bit. Well, that's sort of an environmental cue to that water hemp that, hey, it's getting close to time for me to germinate and start to grow for the year. If we bring a cover crop into that situation, instead of having bare soil that has these temperature spikes, if we have cereal rye out there that is that has some biomass to it, right? We don't see the temperature spikes nearly as dramatic. Like it's more gradual ups and downs, right? So that water hemp seed starts to think that it's buried deeper in the soil profile than what it really is. So we're suppressing a percentage of the overall water hemp seed that will germinate in a given year, right? It won't all germinate. It doesn't make sense from a organism survival standpoint for all of that seed to germinate in any given year. So there's only a percentage of it that germinates every year anyway. And if we can reduce that percentage through the use of the cover crop, then that takes the pressure off of our pre-emergent and post-emergent herbicide applications later on in the year.
So long term, do you think eventually then it will help the overall problem and then eventually maybe you have to plant less cover crops, or is it just going to have to be practice year after year to keep that weed suppression down?
I think in terms of the longevity of my career, it's probably going to be a long-term thing. I don't know that we can ever reach the point where we can reduce overall weed seed bank enough in the foreseeable future for us to not have to look at using cover crops as a means of weed suppression. So, I mean, there's weeds that germinate every year that seed's been in the soil for 40 years sometimes. So yeah, in the foreseeable future, I think it's gonna become more of a mainstream way of helping to suppress some of those weeds. It's very good too. Cover crops are very good at suppressing things like mare's tail, which we typically believe is a winter annual weed that gets its start in the fall and then it will bolt in the spring. But there's a lot of different biotypes of mare's tail out there too. And there's some that are more winter annual, some that are more summer annual. And if you've got that cover crop out there that's competing with some of those, especially those that are germinating and beginning to grow in the fall, you can really do yourself a lot of favors by taking the pressure off your chemical programs.
Very interesting. Torey, anything else that you want to share about cover crops as we look towards the fall?
Yeah, I would just say that, with commodity prices where they are, I know everything comes down to, we have to make money, we have to be profitable, and I'm completely on board with that. I would just say, look at cover crops as not a year in and year out type of decision. It's more of a long-term investment in your overall management system. It's a long-term investment in your soil health. And anything that you can do to improve the health and function of your soil while keeping yourself profitable, that's A+ in my book.
So you can continue to follow Torey. He's one of our Illinois Soy Envoys this year on fieldadvisor.org. He posts crop reports. He's written some great cover crop blogs that you can find on his profile if you go on fieldadvisor.org. Torey, anything else that you want to share with the audience that's not on our radar but you think should be?
No, I think I would just say, I wish everybody a safe harvest this fall. And yeah, I'm more than willing to entertain out of the blue phone calls. So if there's any questions that you might have about cover crop management, that's what I do. I'm more than willing to help entertain those questions.
And how can they get a hold of you?
So you can email me, tcolburn@farmland.org, or my office line is 815-315-0192.
Thanks, Torey.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Field Advisor Podcast. Unbiased, independent agronomy information to keep your farm moving forward. I'm Kelsey Litchfield, your voice from the field. This podcast is funded by the Illinois Soybean Association Checkoff Program. Stay connected with Field Advisor on social media. Follow, like, and share to keep the conversation going. And don't forget to subscribe to the Field Advisor Podcast on your favorite podcast platform.